Alright, and now let's go on to the last passage of this exam, fire in space. Number 34. The shape that fire assumes on Earth is a result of gravitational influence and the movement of molecules. In the microgravity environment of space, moreover, combustion and the resulting fire behave in fundamentally different ways than they do on Earth. Differences that have important implications for researchers. This is a question on transition. Even though the transition comes in the middle of the sentence, all the answer choices are transitions, so we should immediately recognize the question type. So, what's the relationship between the question sentence and its preceding sentence? Well, the first sentence refers to the behavior of fire on Earth, while the second sentence refers to the behavior of fire in space. Furthermore, the second sentence states that there are important differences in fire's behaviors in the two environments. Therefore, we know that its behaviors are different enough to justify the use of a contradicting transition, like however in choice B. Every other choice contains extending transitions that do not fit with the important differences in its behaviors. So choice B is our correct answer. Number 35. A group of engineering students from the University of California at San Diego, for example, tried to find a method to make their biofuel combustion study, fuels derived from once living material, free of the drawbacks researchers face on Earth. There are two ways to solve this question. First, the parenthetical part, which is fuels derived from once living material. This parenthetical part should be preceded by what it modifies. Biofuels are the fuels derived from once living materials, and biofuels directly precedes the parentheses only if choice C is the selected answer. Also, biofuel is not even a noun in choices A, B, and D. It's just an adjective in all three of those choices, and adjectives cannot be further detailed and described as fuels derived from once living material. Alternatively, we can ask ourselves, what is the goal here of these students? Choice A says, students tried to find a method free of the drawbacks researchers face on Earth. A method free of drawbacks researchers face on Earth? That implies methods have drawbacks on Earth? That doesn't make much sense because it's not mentioned in any of the preceding parts of this passage, and methods having drawbacks on Earth is sort of a very vague and confusing statement. Choice B says students strove for a method to make their study free of the drawbacks researchers face on Earth. Again, makes no sense because it was never mentioned that studies have drawbacks on Earth. The preceding sentence stated that combustion is free of drawbacks researchers face on Earth. As it said, combustion and the resulting fire behave in fundamentally different ways than they do on Earth, while choice D, just like choice C, also implies combustion as the thing that is free of the drawbacks. Combustion is incorrectly positioned next to the parentheses and therefore incorrectly modified by the parentheses because combustion is not fuels derived from once living material. Therefore, choice C is the only choice that states combustion as free of the drawbacks researchers face on Earth, and choice C also positions biofuels next to the parentheses that further defines as fuels derived from once living material. So, choice C is our correct answer. Number 36 now. This deformation results in subtle variations in density that both causes uneven heat flow and limits the size of the droplets that can be tested. Since this question asks you to describe the phenomenon depicted in the preceding sentence, let's see if deformation is the most accurate description here. The preceding sentence says the standard method involves burning droplets of fuel, but Earth's gravitational influence causes the droplets to lose spherical symmetry while burning. The key phrase is lose spherical symmetry, which is referencing the loss of its shape, and deformation is by definition an alteration of shape. All the other choices are changes but not specifically related to shape-related changes, and therefore choice A is our correct answer. Number 37 now. We just read this sentence, so I'm going to jump straight into the explanation. This question is one on subject-verb agreement and tenses. This is different from other subject-verb agreement questions in that the agreement is not between the main noun of the sentence and the verb, but between an object of the preposition modified by verbs that are inside the following dependent clause. What cause or causes uneven heat flow and limit or limits the size of the droplets? Subtle variations is what cause and limit, and since our subject-verb pair is structured in the first prepositional phrase, we can eliminate the double preposition in density. We can also eliminate objects in our dependent clause. Cause or causes what? Uneven heat flow is the answer to that question, so we can eliminate this object of the dependent clause's verb. Limit or limits what? The size of the droplets is the answer, so we can eliminate this object as well of the dependent clause's second verb as well. Now reread the reduced clause. Subtle variations that both cause and limit. Variations is plural, so we must use plural verbs, and subtle variations, cause and limit, is correct. And this gives us choice B as the correct answer. Choice C is incorrect because present perfect is used when we try to emphasize that the action started in the past and continues up to the present. And the writer is simply stating a general repeating fact here, not trying to emphasize the duration of the continuous action by referring to its past start and its ongoing action, which is what present perfect would do. Also, variations is plural and cannot be used with has in choice C, as you don't say variations has, you say variations have, if anything. But even if it were have, it would still be incorrect because it's using the wrong tense, present perfect. Number 38 now. Specially designed drop towers built for this purpose reduce these problems, but they provide no more than 10 seconds of microgravity, and droplet size is still too small to produce accurate models of combustion rates. The fact that we have a delete choice among several other verbose choices indicates that this is likely a redundancy question, and we look back to see if there are preceding descriptions that mean built for this purpose. And certainly, if something is specially designed for something, it would be built for that purpose, and therefore the phrase is redundant and needs to be deleted. All the other choices are variations of saying specially designed, so the delete choice C is our correct answer. Number 39 now. The UCSD students understood that these limitations had to be surmounted. Which choice provides the most effective transition between ideas in the paragraph? The question directly indicates that you may want to change the preceding sentence so that the next sentence contains an effective transition to its preceding sentence. And certainly, if we are going to start the next sentence with the transition as part of the program, we need to refer to some program in its preceding sentence. Only choice B contains reference to a program, namely NASA's Microgravity University program, as all the other choices don't even contain the word program. So choice B is our correct answer. Number 40. On the planet's ascent, passengers feel twice Earth's gravitational pull, but for brief periods at the peak of the trajectory, weightlessness or microgravity similar to what is experienced in space is achieved. This question requires you to recognize that the phrase, or microgravity similar to what is experienced in space, that phrase is a non-restrictive phrase that modifies weightlessness, since the sentence makes sense without the phrase. Let's read the reduced sentence to confirm that it makes sense. On the plane's ascent, passengers feel twice Earth's gravitational pull, but for brief periods at the peak of the trajectory, weightlessness is achieved. Now, the general rule of thumb is that non-restrictive phrases do not redefine the scope of the word it's modifying. They merely redetail or give more supplementary information on them. Let me give you an example of a restrictive phrase. Children in the playground are loud. Well, if we take away the restrictive phrase in the playground, then you're just saying children are loud, and that changes the meaning of the sentence. Not all children are loud. By taking away the restrictive phrase in the playground, we have stated something entirely different. But non-restrictive phrases do not change the meaning of the sentence because they just merely provide detail on the word that it's modifying. And that's the case here. Weightlessness is achieved does not redefine the scope of the word weightlessness, whereas children in the playground redefines children to be specific children. Children in the playground are loud, not children are loud. Therefore, that is the logic that breaks down when you reduce restrictive phrases and you end up stating something entirely different, and that's the logical check that we need to do before determining whether we should insert commas for non-restrictive phrases or extract commas for restrictive phrases. Now, non-restrictive phrases are preceded and followed by commas, as you see here and here in choice C, which is our correct answer. If you check any of the other choices and eliminate the non-restrictive phrase in each sentence, you can verify that the sentence becomes illogical. Let's go from choice A. It does not have a non-restrictive phrase since there is only one comma, which comes after space. The comma does not belong there as it's not closing an introductory phrase nor followed by a conjunction. Also, it's not starting a phrase at the end of the sentence since is achieved is not modifying space. So, choice A would only be correct if there were no comma after space and if the phrase or microgravity similar to what is experienced in space, if that were a restrictive phrase, which it is not, as we just saw when we reviewed choice C. Choice B. Let's reduce the non-restrictive phrase in this choice, which is similar to what is experienced. How do we know this is the non-restrictive phrase? Well, that's what's between the commas, so we assume it to be. The reduced sentence reads, weightlessness or microgravity in space is achieved. That means either weightlessness or microgravity in space is achieved. This changes the content of the sentence. It doesn't quite make sense that one or the other is achieved because weightlessness and microgravity in space are essentially the same things. And finally, choice D. Since microgravity is the only word wrapped by commas, we assume that this is our non-restrictive phrase now. If we reduce that non-restrictive phrase, or in this case, non-restrictive word, the reduced sentence reads, weightlessness or similar to what is experienced in space is achieved. And that makes no sense because, okay, you can say weightlessness is achieved, but similar to what is experienced in space is achieved? What does that mean? How do you achieve similar to what is experienced in space? That makes no sense. And so choice D is incorrect. That's why choice C is our only correct answer. Number 41 now. These flights allowed the UCSD students to experience microgravity. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following: and perform their experiment without traveling into space. For this content question, you need to recognize that the writer wants to portray the microgravity simulating flight as an improving advancement to the drop towers. So he would want to elaborate on the advantage the students gained from the flights as stated in choice A. The author did already reveal that these flights did not go into space by referring to them as flights that simulate the microgravity environment of space. But he did not yet connect that not going into space is the advantage for these students. How do we know that this is the students' advantage? Well, the sentence says these flights allowed the UCSD students to experience microgravity and perform their experiment without traveling into space. When something allowed someone to do something, that is an advantage for that someone. For instance, the calculators allowed me to calculate quickly. Calculate quickly is clearly the advantage for me. The writer did reveal that researchers fly their experiments aboard aircraft that simulate the microgravity environment of space. But that doesn't really say that this is beneficial. It's just sort of a factual sentence revealing what kind of aircraft researchers fly their experiments on. Therefore, because the author did reveal and address not traveling into space in that sentence, choice B is incorrect, as the previous paragraph did address this point. Choice C is incorrect because this is not a restatement, but a relation connecting without traveling into space to be an advantage for these students. And choice D is incorrect because this benefit and advantage is precisely what the focus of this paragraph is and the main reason why microgravity simulating flights were developed in the first place. So choice D is wrong and only choice A is our correct answer. Number 42. Specifically, they investigated the combustion of biofuel droplets in microgravity for twice as long as could be accomplished in drop towers and to perform tests with large droplets. This question has a conjunction and therefore the parallel structure needs to be consistent across the conjunction and. So we reduce the combustion, which is an object, of biofuel droplets, which is a prepositional phrase, in microgravity, another prepositional phrase, for twice as long as could be accomplished, another prepositional phrase, and finally, the last prepositional phrase in drop towers. So, after reducing these phrases, let's read the reduced form. They blanked and to perform. Now we can clearly see that the left side needs to be structured with an infinitive, which is to plus a base verb, in order for the structure to be consistent across our conjunction and, which on the right side also has an infinitive, to perform. The only choice that offers an infinitive on the left side of our conjunction and is choice C. They were able to investigate and to perform tests with larger droplets. Number 43. The larger spherically symmetric droplets burned longer and gave the students more reliable data on combustion rates of biofuels because the droplets' uniform shape reduced the variations in density that hindered tests performed in normal gravity. Which choice most effectively establishes that the UCSD students' approach had solved the problem mentioned earlier in the passage relating to burning fuel on Earth? First, the beginning of the passage references the shape of fire as the factor that leads to differences in combustion that have important implications for researchers. This passage establishes spherical symmetry of droplets as the ultimate characteristic that allows droplets to be analyzed without deformation and subtle density variations that cause uneven heat flow and limit the size of the droplets that can be tested. Furthermore, the whole reason why drop towers and microgravity space simulated flights were designed in the first place is to eliminate these deformations caused by Earth's gravity. Finally, sentence 43 references this important characteristic in closing, stating that the droplet's uniform shape reduced the variations in density that hinder tests performed in normal gravity. Therefore, with respect to numerous references to the importance of droplet shape throughout the passage, spherically symmetric offered in choice A most effectively establishes that the student's approach had solved the problem relating to burning fuel on Earth. So choice A is our correct answer. And our final question of this practice exam, number 44. Better combustion rate models may even lead to the production of more fuel-efficient engines and improved techniques for fighting fires in space or at future outposts on the moons and Mars. The phrase "for fighting fires" is a restrictive prepositional phrase modifying techniques because if it were non-essential information and if it were non-restrictive, reducing it would lead to a still logical statement and the logic of the sentence would not change. Let's reduce it and check the logic. Better combustion rate models may even lead to the production of more fuel-efficient engines and improved techniques. This does not make much sense because combustion rate models lead to improved techniques specifically for fighting fires, and since better combustion rate models do not lead to all kinds of improved techniques in general, we know that the phrase contains essential information and is used restrictively, so we cannot precede this restrictive preposition with a comma. In space is also restrictive because the improved techniques do not pertain to fighting all kinds of fires in general, but specifically it pertains to fighting fires in space. Again, this reduction or logic checking exercise confirms in space is restrictive, and so the restrictive phrase again is not preceded with a comma. Finally, or at future outposts must also be restrictive since we just verified that in space is restrictive, and the conjunction or indicates that the components on both sides of or are equivalent both in structure and usage. Therefore, the phrase "at future outposts" must be restrictive just like the phrase "in space." And since it is restrictive, it is also not preceded with a comma. Choice D is our correct answer because it is the only choice where all three prepositional phrases are restrictive without any commas. Well, this wraps it up for the solution videos of Practice Exam 1, and I will see you guys in our next video that sorts and analyzes question categories in this exam collectively.